Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to this third class of Madrasa readings, where we explore North African Madrasa curriculum and pedagogy. How do these people, isolated in their deserts and mountains, study? What do they study, and under which conditions? For a comprehensive idea, please watch the official documentary Imahdaran on this YouTube channel or on the channel of Middle Eastern and African Studies West Bohemia University Pilsen YouTube channel. So last time we discussed briefly mantiq studies through the didactic poem As-Sullam al-Munawraq of Sidi Abdul Rahman al-Akhdari, and then we discussed مصطلح الحديث studies through البيقونية الغرامية النخبة ألفية الحديث العراقي and other textbooks. Today I thought of more popular field, more discussed and even more controversial in modern times, fiqh or Islamic jurisprudence. So what do Algerian, Moroccan and Mauritanian madrasa teach in fiqh? How and for how long? Is it true that they study only Maliki fiqh without any comparative approach? Is that enough to form a faqih, a modern faqih, and other questions? Let me begin by connecting today's topic with the previous ones, as most of those disciplines overlap. Mantiq helped other disciplines be more structured and therefore flourish. We saw one example in the mustalah to define some categories of hadith. Al-Anwa' scholars used mantiq, right? And in the session on As-Sullam, we mentioned that Al-Ghazali, faqih, jurist, theologian, and logician, was clear about mantiq being involved in almost every field. For fiqh, mantiq is also present. Its definition and the debates over it, and mainly in the foundations of fiqh known as usul al-fiqh, as we will see next time. So mantiq is connected to fiqh. Fiqh is arguably the longest part of madrasa studies after Quran and al-Lugha al-Arabiya, after Arabic, and that's because it covers everything about Muslim life, from the acts of ibadat or worship like tahara, ablutions, and purification, daily and occasional prayers, fasting, obligatory charity or zakat, pilgrimage, hajj, to financial, social, and political interactions such as zawaj, marriage, divorce, talaq, mediations, sulh, transactions, muamalat, al-buyu', and even crafts and judiciary, like peace and war issues. Additionally, fiqh is expected to reinforce social values and keep community and individual consciousness or conscience awake, ضمير, as a fiqh shouldn't be taken literally or mechanically. It's conceivable that if fiqh is the law that organizes the life of Muslim societies and every aspect of their lives, then it needs a careful approach selective and critical mind, while some questions may just need some polish or even be omitted from contemporary fiqh dedicated to practice within modern Muslim societies, especially in social and political matters and less in worship chapters. What's the roof of reform in the legislative system في المنظومة الفقهية سقف التجديد? That's where people disagree, both Shia and Sunnah actually. Personally, being relatively Maliki, the 12th century old tradition, Al-Madrasa al-Malikiyya, has always developed and become more productive in similar circumstances of our times. I mean, when there are intellectual encounters and philosophical and ethical challenges, like in Al-Medina, Al-Iraq, Egypt, Al-Maghrib, and Al-Andalus, which explains an incomparable, I claim, richness in legal creativity, which is beyond the time limits of our video. For better or worse, this is the reason why we observe nowadays that fiqh books are the most available in Islamic platforms and libraries, and fatwa is the most consumed aspect of religion, and the madhabs or the legislative schools of thought can be the most sensitive issues, as often questions of disagreement have escalated to sectarian or creed conflicts, مسائل تحولت إلى مسائل عقدية, which is not supposed to happen, as fiqh normally deals with the branches of religion or the aspects on which multiple opinions are valid, as long as they derive from the known sources of legislation, مصادر التشريع المعروفة. And for centuries, tens of madhabs coexisted and still do. Sometimes, despite conflicts, very different madhabs lived side by side. Baghdad was known for its multi-madhab, let's say, nature. Egypt historically and until now actually has many madhabs, including the four established Sunni ones, Al-Zahiriyya and Al-Malikiyya in Al-Andalus. In Algeria we have Al-Ibadiyya and Al-Malikiyya side by side for centuries, despite the historical challenges. For the definition of fiqh now, let's go back to our topic: madrasa curriculum, madrasa readings in fiqh. The definition of fiqh. So الفقه هو العلم بالأحكام العملية المكتسبة من الأدلة التفصيلية. It's the knowledge of the detailed legal rulings related to practice, or which a legally responsible person is supposed to practice. Sidi Abdullah ibn al-Hajj Ibrahim al-Shanqiti, in his Maraqi, Alfiyat Maraqi Saud, which I often hear from my best teachers, Dr. Muhammad Sama'i, an Algerian scholar and faqih, and Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya. They often quote Al-Maraqi, He says والفقه هو العلم بالأحكام والفقه هو العلم بالأحكام للشرع والفعل نماها النامي أدلة تفصيل منها مكتسب والعلم بالصلاح فيما قد ذهب. So fiqh is about the debatable questions of Islamic law and not the generative mechanism of fiqh, the foundational texts and rules studied in usul al-fiqh. This is an important distinction because it has real consequences. For example, all Muslims everywhere, all times agree that salat wajiba, that prayer in general is obligatory. And this is not called fiqh. This is shara, an explicit ruling on which there is a consensus, like there is like an undeniable consensus. But if you look up details of the obligatory prayer or salat, you will see many issues of disagreement, sometimes within one school of thought, and even between the founder of the school and his direct students. For example, where to place the hands in salat, how to move the index like this or like this or like this, or how to move the index during tashahhud. Can one give money instead of food in zakat al-fitr, etc.? So all these debatable questions go under the field of fiqh, unlike وجوب الصلاة وتحريم القتل إلى آخره. So what do madrasa students study during their fiqh training? In many madrasas across North Africa, students start with Ibn Ashir. Ibn Ashir is Nazm. Now you should remember the terminology. Nazm means a didactic poem, right? Nazm. But in my case, I studied something before Ibn Ashir, back in 2006 or 7, and it was Al-Akhdari. It was Al-Akhdari. He's here again, Al-Akhdari. So Al-Akhdari's works are not just sullam in logic. They are also compulsory in fiqh, in balagha, rhetoric, as well as we will see soon. Sidi Abdul Rahman al-Akhdari composed a short nathar prose known as Mukhtasar al-Akhdari fi al-Ibadat, which covers al-Tahara wal-Salat, Ibadat only, related to ablution and prayers only. In a very simple language and approach, and it was basically authored for kids around 7 to 10 years old. And this small book ends with the chapter of sahl, forgetfulness in prayer. So I remember that when we reached that chapter, my Sheikh, Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Karim from Ain Saleh, southern Algeria, who was the student of Sheikh Muhammad Zawi, rahimahullah, who was the student of Sheikh Muhammad bin Malik, rahimahullah, who was the student of Al-Allama Mulay Ahmad Tahir Subai, rahimahullah, and Sidi Bil-Kabir, among other great South Algerian scholars. So when we finished Al-Akhdari, the Sheikh opened the first nazm actually I had studied in my life, and that was Al-Abqari fi nazmi sahwi Al-Akhdari. I still have my copy of Al-Akhdari with all the comments, the taqrirat. I hope they are visible. They're not so tidy and clean, and structured, but they are here for barakah and for the good memories of those years. So العبقري في نظم الأخضري للشيخ سيدي أبو عبد الله محمد بن أبة. And some of its verses go وبعد فاعلم أنني قصدت إنجاز ما كنت به وعدت من نظم سهو الشيخ الأخضري معتذرا لكل لوذعي من فرط جهلي وقصور فهمي وخطرات لا تزال تهمي برجز سميته وهو حري بالعبقري في نظم سهو الأخضري. And that was my best part, honestly. It teaches a lot of things. And then it goes باب سجود السهو سنة فاسمعا لزيد أو نقصان أو هما معا فالنقص قد سن له القبلي والزيد قد سن له البعدي وقبل قبلي وبعده جارا تشهد وبعد بعدي يرى مع سلام آخر إلى آخره, etc. And because I mentioned Mulay Ahmad al-Tahiri, he also wrote a commentary on Al-Abqari. I think he called him Al-Iqd al-Jawhari. Al-Iqd al-Jawhari. So not all the not every Iqd is about intimate relationships in Islamic tradition. Just to recall the طوق الحمامة of Ibn Hazm. After Al-Akhdari, we moved to Abdul Wahid ibn Ashir. Abdul Wahid ibn Ashir al-Fasi from the 17th century, a 314 verse nazm titled Al-Murshid al-Mu'in على الضروري من علوم الدين, Al-Murshid al-Mu'in. And we studied it with Mayyara Sughra, a brief commentary by Muhammad Mayyara. So Ibn Ashir is, I think I have Mayyara here. You see the, I'm using the front camera, so I know that you can't see. But this is مختصر الدر الثمين المورد المعين على المنظومة المسماة المرشد المعين الشهيرة بميارة الصغرى. So Ibn Ashir is more expansive compared to Al-Akhdari, even though both were composed for children. Ibn Ashir reaches the zakat, at least zakat chapter, meaning in addition to tahara and the salat, it covers fasting and sawm wa zakat. Both Al-Akhdari and Ibn Ashir are memorized, and their verses are commented carefully. Each word is explained linguistically. The whole textbook, even though it includes introductions to other disciplines, which I will revisit in other sessions, is taught thoroughly. The branches of fiqh covered by these two books are also demonstrated by the faqih, the teacher, how to perform the tashahhud, how to tighten your turban, your imama, how to measure the food for zakat, and even how to treat your the books we read from. So all with a kind of chain of transmission, in which the sheikh imitates or at least narrates the practice he witnessed his teachers doing or practicing. The manzumat are often revised in group recitation after al-Maghrib, after the sunset prayers. I did that kind of revision with really strong faqih, another Algerian faqih from the west, I think from Mu'askar or Mustaghanam, Sheikh Muhammad Abu Hafs. in Annaba. In madrasa, there are often no formal exams. This is another memory I wanted to share about madrasa study approach. In my case, we had two forms of exam with these two books, Al-Akhdari and Ibn Ashir. The first was quite formal. The Sheikh used to ask me direct questions. But the second one was really unplanned, and it was really, really interesting. Um, uh, and that's when people came to ask the faqih, the sheikh, some questions from real life, and he would call a student to answer instead of him. Um, in southern areas, specifically Ibn Ashir is written on al-alwah, exactly like Quranic verses, usually beneath the ayat, or beneath the thumun. And that's how pronunciation is corrected, besides memorization by heart. For those who are not happy with memorization, writing and repeating verses is a great strategy to improve pronunciation, to get the sense of the language, and to enrich the vocabulary and familiarize yourself with the essence or the ruh al-fiqh. After Ibn Ashir, students normally move to al-Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani from the 10th century. Ibn Abi Zayd is known as Malikun al-Saghir, the young Malik, who represents the آخر المتقدمين وأول المتأخرين. He is the last of the early generation of the Malikis and the first of the late generation. He wrote a risala based on the request of his relative, Quran teacher Ibn Mahraz. There is much said about the role of these two men in the political situation in North Africa during the political and sectarian encounters between the Malikis, the Ibadis, the Kharijis, and the Fatimids. But let's focus on now on an objective fact that the Risala was written for kids. Again, so Risala is written for kids. It's clearly stated that the book was written for children, those who are still memorizing the Quran in Kuttab. Right? So the book includes almost everything that fiqh discusses. And according to some statistics, there are 40,000 issues or branch or fara' fiqhi. It's a substantial textbook in the madhab, and it's often called al-bakurat al-madhab, the first fruit of al-madhab. And according to some accounts, it was written in gold, kutibat bil-dhahab. Today, الرسالة هي هذه الرسالة. This is with تقريب المعاني للشرنوبي. So it was written for kids. It encompasses almost every known chapter of fiqh, but for an average native Arabic speaker, or let's raise the bar, it's worth it. For an average native Arabic speaking doctor of Islamic studies, or those called Islamologue. I heard this a lot in France. So for these people, many of them would struggle with the risala, essentially primarily written for children, especially sheikhless doctors. And that's not only because of the Arabic language. No, it's the terminology, the fiqh language, the fiqh phrases, the fiqh idioms, and the pronunciation. ضبط المصطلحات، ضبط الكلمات. Let alone بركة العلم. And this can cause, I mean, for that category of people working on classical textbooks without traditional training, this cause استغلاق and استشكال. And here is a point in pedagogy, research, ethics, and education in general. I saw some fuqaha who would stop the lesson when the madad, the spiritual support, cuts out of a sudden, or the fath stops. Some of those fuqaha studied those texts for years with more than one teacher, and yet they say استغلق علي الأمر أو أشكل علي الأمر. They stop the lesson and they said, I don't know, I will revise it, because in the هذا العلم دين. So they study and teach with or for a purpose, right? They have a different intention. I have never seen, this is just a parenthesis, I've never seen anyone more responsible in teaching than traditionally trained scholars. Even if we sometimes disagree with what they teach, that's to be clear. But unlike those who chase positions or publications, they educate rather than merely or simply teach. And their students are, most of them, are talaba, not learners pursuing grades, and they are treated like their own children. Anyway, so parenthesis. Risala. I said it encompasses almost all the fiqh questions, right? Not just worship sections like al-Akhdari and Ibn Ashir. So we can just open a Risala and you find you can scan the table of content and see that right after the chapter of sacrifices, ضحايا, you find al-aqiqa wal-sayd, hunting. I hope you're following. It's fiqh. It treats the rulings of these activities and acts and actions. What is legal, what is illegal, what is prescribed, what is disliked, what is mandatory. And then, yeah, so there are all these topics. Then comes the chapter of al-iman, wal-nudhur, oaths, and marriages, al-ankiha, divorce, and child care, etc. And then the buyu', financial transactions, الشفعة والهبة والحبس والعارية والودائع واللقطة, etc. Then you come across al-hudud, the punishments, the courts and judiciary rulings, al-fara'id, inheritance, and some personal or even individual questions on circumcision and things to do with the body, the human body, like shaving body hair and clothing rules, food, drinks, alternative medicine, ruqya, and there is even a chapter on entertainment and games like horse riding, etc. So all these are included in the fiqh study, and they are all in الرسالة of ابن أبي زيد. القيرواني. Trying to remember something. I studied حاشية العدوي على كفاية الطالب الرباني. It was recommended or by one of my fiqh teachers, Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Saib, an amazing Maliki faqih, who made this book along with شرح الحطاب on Khalil and Hudud ibn Arafa. He made these 3 books very attractive to us, just because he beautifully quoted them regularly in class. Ibn Abi Zayd authored longer books, by the way, so he's a major name in al-madhab. He has al-nawadir wa ziyadat, but those books, you know, هذه المطولات and the riwaya books and the تحرير المذهب, like هذا النوادر والزيادات and المقدمات of Ibn Rushd al-Jadd and other books are rarely studied in madrasas, and not even in advanced institutions like al-Qarawiyyin nowadays. They're the most advanced fiqh books we took were Sidi Khalil and Bidayat al-Mujtahid of Ibn Rushd al-Hafid, as I will add soon. So the final stage of fiqh studies in madrasas, southern Algeria, southern Morocco, southern or Mauritania, is Sidi Khalil, المختصر by Egyptian علامة Khalil ibn Ishaq al-Jundi from the 14th century, who composed a summary in almost 20 years, and in which he summarizes جامع الأمهات لابن الحاجب, and which became the number one. I mean, al-Mukhtasar Khalil, Sidi Khalil, became number one source of fatwa according to the mashhur. المشهور is the ما كثر قائله والمعتمد ما قوي دليله. So al-mashhur, or the most common opinion within the Maliki madhab, it's said that Mukhtasar Khalil contains 100,000 questions or fara' fiqhi. And again, it is a highly advanced textbook, and it covers all fiqh chapters. There are more than 100 commentaries and glosses, شروح وحواشي ومنظومات. If we count منظومات, this will make it definitely more than 100 on Mukhtasar Khalil. Almost every new gloss tries to add contemporary issues of its time, right, based on Khalil's original branch. يخرجون على فروع المختصر, which made this practice made Mukhtasar Khalil a basis of internal ijtihad within the Maliki madhab. Among the Algerians who commented on Sidi Khalil, I can remember now Ramasi. I think that Abdurrahman al-Disi in the 20th century. Abdurrahman al-Disi has هذا سلم الوصول, and النصح المبذول. I think he explained his own nazm. So I think Abdurrahman al-Disi commented on Khalil. سعيد قدورة عند بلدينا البوني أحمد بن قاسم ماشي it's not the البوني المتوسط هذا صاحب شمس المعارف. No, the most recent Buni. There are three famous Bunis. الأول, the early Buni, on which I wrote my I did my PhD, شارح الموطأ. البوني هذا الأصل قرطبي. And the middle Buni, صاحب شمس المعارف. And the last one, البوني, أحمد ibn Qasim, who versified Sidi Khalil. He wrote a nazm. He transformed it into poetry. There are other Algerians, as there are many local works in Morocco and Mauritania and across the Maliki countries in Africa, including works in Tamazight, in Berber language and other languages, many other languages. Many madrasas in the region teach Zarqani, gloss on the explanation or the commentary of Dardir. So Sidi Khalil, هذا إبراهيم اللقاني, said نحن خليليون فإن ضل خليل ضللنا. We are Khalilis. So if Khalil goes astray, we go astray with him. And this is just an exaggeration, I guess, understood as I understand. It should be taken as a commitment to this textbook. But others came later and added نحن مالكيون قاسميون خليليون فإن ضل خليل ضللنا. Right, I can't go further into further details. We need to discuss the curriculum or what's left. So students of madrasas study other fiqh textbooks after Khalil, even though Khalil is the highest text of fatwa in the Maliki madhab, right? So these four books are sufficient to master the fiqh terminology and the spirit of the madhab, but they don't provide adilla, proofs or evidence, nor fiqh views of from other madhabs like al-Shafi'iyya, wal-Ahnaf, wal-Hanafiyya, wal-Zahiriyya, wal-Zaydiyya, etc., wal-Hanabila. They only answer the question what. What does the madhab say on, say, shortening the prayer during travel? What is the Maliki stance on the purity of dogs? What do Malikis say about the ruling of couples' household responsibilities, المعاشرة, etc. And other مشاكل مسائل البيع العينة والضع وتعجل وبيع البرنامج, etc. So they just represent madhab, right? So often الأخضري وابن عاشر والرسالة ومختصر خليل do not deal with the why and based on what questions. That's because the Maliki madhab in the region has long been without competition from other madhabs. لا توجد منافسة. المذهب غير منافس. So why do we need evidence in textbooks? We don't need adilla in the textbooks. So that's I'm just trying to explain very briefly the situation, especially when textual or rational evidence requires huge efforts to grasp and develop. In Iraq, however, we have Malikis or Maliki textbooks with detailed istidlal or adilla, in Al-Andalus as well. And that's because in these regions madhab competition was strong, right? So scholars had to reinforce their educational system with reason and textual evidence. While it's not enough to stop at these four textbooks, الأخضري وابن عاشر والرسالة وخليل, as who would suggest this, الموسوعيين, or ambitious people, let's call them encyclopedic scholars, and then and the few remaining real mujtahids. These people may think that it's not enough, right, to stop at these 4 books. It's always not safe to skip them. الوقوف عند هذه الأربعة غير كاف للمجتهد. So it's not enough for an ambitious or someone with a great himma in mind. But it's also not safe to skip them, as some maqasid amateur or a neo-usuli or a semi-mujtahids suggest. That's at least how madrasa trained people perceive this, I claim. So that's to support this claim. Scholars in North Africa don't consider someone as a scholar or of Islamic studies, or nor a faqih, if they are not familiar with, not just familiar, if they don't master these 4 sources. الغلاوي هذا this is my copy of الطليحة with الطليحة I don't know if it's visible. It's not in great conditions. It's a poem that lists and explains the books considered essential and significant in the madhab for scholarship and training in issuing fatwa. And the comments you saw, hopefully, are my own notes, taken directly from one of my best teachers, one of the most knowledgeable ulama, yet little known, Sidi Mahfouz Grihim from Sousse in Morocco. So هذا الطليحة أو بطليحية says علامة الجهل في هذا الجيل، علامة الجهل في هذا الجيل ترك الرسالة إلى خليل، وترك الأخضر إلى ابن عاشر، وترك ذين للرسالة احذري. So these 4 books are to be mastered, but as I said earlier, one needs other disciplines and other elements, which we will discuss next time. So North African madrasas are not fully cut off from dalil or evidence, right? We saw that they study mantiq, right? They study usul al-fiqh, as we will discuss hopefully in the next session. And they do that for rational and argumentative training of fiqh. They study commentaries on Quran, ayat al-ahkam. They study ahadith al-ahkam, or fiqh al-hadith, as we will discuss in another session of madrasa readings. Here, most importantly, they study comparative fiqh, because we are discussing fiqh through هذا بداية المجتهد. I have بداية المجتهد somewhere here. So the celebrated comparative fiqh book. I had a chance to study, to attend sessions on this book by Sidi Al-Ghazi Al-Husseini, rahimahullah, in Fas around 2011. Um, session in some sus, madrasas and al-Qarawiyyin, where fuqaha often delve deep in istidlal. Um, Even in early study stages, actually a few months ago, I visited a class of Sidi Abdullah Rayis, a prominent faqih, an amazing educator and poet, where he was teaching Ibn Ashir, and he supported almost every line, every branch with its reasoning and textual root. I believe this is better in this digital era, which came with both mass information and a lot of ignorance, and also helped radical movements like Wahhabism and others invade North Africa and North African Islamic tradition and confuse young people with their fallacies and shallow approach to religion, not only in North Africa but also in Europe and everywhere else. By the way, I mentioned Europe, so this reminds me that I recently presented on the genealogy of the Maliki madhab in Europe at the Oriental Institute here in Prague, the Academy, Czech Academy of Science. I think the video or highlights are available somewhere in this channel, on this channel. Right, so advanced levels of fiqh studies in madrasas. So students, madrasa students who continue their education in universities in fiqh programs often take snippets from longer fiqh sources, usually under the فقه الحديث, under this discipline of فقه الحديث, آيات الأحكام, or simply textbooks on istidlal methods, which I will reveal in the session on usul al-fiqh. Right, I think we must stop here. That was supposed to be a brief overview of the fiqh curriculum in or training methods in North African madrasas. Let's say, as a rule of thumb, I encourage a balanced combination of traditional and contemporary training in fiqh, because receiving a traditional fiqh training is great, right? But if it's not, if it's incomplete or delivered through the wrong methods, there is a high risk of misunderstanding or even radicalization. On the especially when it comes to contemporary contexts, right? On the other hand, now university degrees in fiqh often produce half-educated students or empty scholars of Islamic studies, people who in reality know very little, or as I like to say, they know nothing. Jon Snow. You enter the university for a fiqh program as a as an ignorant and humble student, جاهلا متواضعا, and you graduate as an ignorant, arrogant doctor. So this should be all on the fiqh training in our madrasas in North Africa. See you soon with another discipline. Salam.